Let's take a look at the settings for a store and forward engine. I'm on my gateway. I'm in the configure section under databases and store and forward here, and you can see I have several engines already defined. You'll notice the note down below, but a store and forward engine is automatically created for each database connection. So as soon as I add a new connection, a new engine will appear here. Now before moving on, it's important to know that many objects and subsystems at Ignition utilize the store and forward system, such as the alarm journal. Some of these systems also have settings to skip or completely bypass the store and forward system. Now let's take a look at some of the settings here. All three of these engines have the same settings, so it doesn't really matter which one I click on, but I'll start with my MySQL. I'll click on the Edit button here, and we'll start talking about these properties. The memory buffer size here dictates how many records can be held within the memory buffer. I'll scroll down here just a little bit, and let's take a look at the store settings next. These settings dictate when we should take records from the memory buffer and move them to the disk buffer. The disk cache enabled setting here, if disabled, Ignition will no longer store records onto the hard drive. So if the memory buffer becomes full, you could lose records. While the disk cache is enabled, the max records property here dictates the maximum number of records that will be saved to the hard drive. And then we have the write size and write time properties. These are used to determine when to move the records from the memory buffer to the disk buffer. With the default settings, we'll wait until there are 25 records, or at least 5,000 milliseconds have passed. Whichever one of these two becomes true first. If we scroll down a little bit further here, we can take a look at the forward settings. These settings control how often we take records from either buffer and move them to the database. We have another write size and write time, which work in a very similar fashion to the store settings up above. So again, we'll wait until there are at least 25 records in a buffer, or until we've had items in the buffer for at least 1 second. Once either are true, then the records are pushed to the database. And again, this is for both buffers. If you look down a little bit further, you can enable a schedule, and then define when you want that schedule to run. This means that Ignition will not write anything to the database until the scheduled time. This gives you an opportunity to control when you're pushing your data into your database.